cannot shut up about books. Hi Beats, it's EKG. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Welcome here if you are new. My name is Ebony. This video is going to be a somewhat of an amalgamation of books that I read in January and February, what I'm currently reading, a little debrief to update you, as well as where I've been, what's been going on in my mind. But I suppose we'll go in order of business. You'll notice that the list is very slim, and that's just because of number one, being hit with an enormous reading slump, but that also had to do with the fact that February is just such a chaotic month for me to begin with. Work usually gets very, very busy in February, as well as I haven't really been reading as much because first off, my birthday starts off the month of February, and then there's a birthday literally like every few days for me. I've just been spending a lot of time with family, friends, as well as really getting into my head when it comes to creating content, which is just like a whole nother topic in itself. But essentially, I was facing burnout, and I just really wanted to take the time to feel excited, and not that I'm not unexcited to film, but just to have good ideas and feel really excited about them. I usually like to do a lot of more creative video ideas and things like that, which is fun when the iron's hot, but when I run out of ideas, I'm like, so yeah, it's just been a combination of all of those things. Just thank you for the support, for continuously supporting me. It means the world to me. There's been a lot of new people that have been tuning into me, so thank you so much. Hit 3,000 subscribers, which is crazy, and probably also why I went into a little bit of a hiatus, just because I was getting anxiety from that. But yeah, I feel more calm, more collected, and less likely to be overthinking the way that I am. That was a very long-winded way of me just catching you up into what's been going on in my life outside of here. So now let's get into the books that I read in January. The first book that I completed in January 2022 was Stag's Leap by Sharon Olds. This is a collection of poetry in which Sharon Olds muses on the end of her 40-year marriage. She talks about the process of divorce, what grieving a relationship is like, as well as finding a new life and a new identity outside of that relationship. These poems were so good. Sharon Olds' writing is like God tier, super good. I love Sharon Olds' poetry, and I spoke about this in my beginner friendly poetry recommendations video, just because I truly love poetry that I think, or I find, easily accessible, but that still do marvelous things with language and imagery, and turning ideas that we normally have, or like preconceived notions of topics that we normally have, and flipping them upside down and over, and in a sense discovering something new about a thing that we constantly look at, or maybe not even look at. But yeah, Sharon Olds' writing was very rich and beautiful. I recommend her work. I did have to break up this poetry collection while reading, just because the main theme is the end of her marriage and going through every little thing that entailed. So I find that, I don't want to say the topic was exhausting me, but I just found that I needed breaks in between it for no particular reason. I just really wanted to make sure that I was being fully present in Sharon Olds' writing, which is something that I'm working on overall, just being present in my reading. I recommended this book before, I recommend it again. It was great. I really want to read more Sharon Olds' work. Up next in January, I wanted to get ahead a little bit on my reading of Black authors. So I read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. The Fire Next Time is 2 essays that were written on the centennial anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. James Baldwin's searing examination and observations on race in America I thought it was great. And specifically what I enjoyed the most about this collection, the first essay was written to his nephew, whose name is also James, and James Baldwin writes advice to him almost. And then also the second collection is the second essay is James Baldwin's interaction with other prominent Black figures and finding his space in predominantly white spaces. As a writer of color, as a Black writer, I thought the message at the end was also very uplifting, despite how unrelenting his critique was or is. And yeah, I highly recommend that you check this out. Okay, so a book that I read that kind of disappointed me a little bit, not gonna lie. Not that I didn't like it or enjoy it, but like I wasn't as captivated by it as other people are, and that is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Now, I have a theory as to why I might not have liked this as much, and it's because I listened to it as an audiobook, which might have been a #1 mistake. But essentially, Before the Coffee Gets Cold is set in this coffee shop in Japan, in which there is an urban legend, if you will, that you are able to go back in time to a singular moment, and the only caveat to going back in time is that you have to return to the present before the coffee gets cold, or you will have severe oh my god, not circumstances, you will have severe consequences. And it was a very lighthearted read. It was just the right amount of heartwarming and heart-wrenching and pulling at the heartstrings that I needed, especially in the cold winter months in the Northeast. But I just was hoping for a little bit more, which tends to be my interaction with things that are super hyped up on the internet. Not saying that I disliked it or that it was bad, it just was fine to me and I enjoyed it, but it's not a favorite, if that makes sense. Yeah, Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Okay, and lastly, the final book that I finished in January is probably one of my favorite books of the year so far. Not that I've read that many, but who's counting? And that is Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. This follows our two main characters. It's a romance, which, are we surprised? Because I don't really read that many romances, but this romance is for me, for sure. And I'm gonna explain why. So it follows Aldo Ronaldo, who is a theoretical mathematician. He is a doctoral candidate teaching adjuncting at a university while simultaneously pondering certain universal phenomena like the occurrence of hexagons, which is important, the way that bees move in their hive, and he also has his own battles with mental health and depression. And in comes our girl Reagan, who is working as a tour guide in an art museum. She graduated top of her class from the University of Chicago, I'm pretty sure, but she is also struggling with or she has also been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So it was a really, really interesting romance because it just had all of those like heartwarming things, but it just felt very, very, I don't want to say that other romances feel superficial because that's unfair and that's not what I'm trying to say, but Olivia Blake did a great job of really tackling these major existential meta conversations surrounding the universe and what a paradise is like, and putting it into like these two atoms of Ronaldo and Reagan and fusing them together and seeing what happens. And in itself, like, her writing it felt like a science experiment, which is up my alley. The writing in here was, oh my god, crazy good. There were so many quotes about art and loss and love, and it was just very, very enjoyable. And it's the type of book that I feel like the author peered deep into my mind and took every single topic that I would want to address in my own book and wrote it herself. This is a book that made me realize I've never had a single original thought as a writer. And it was quite humbling and kind of set me spiraling a little bit too, but in a good way. And yeah, it was great. You can follow me on Goodreads because I read Alone with You in the Ether on my Kindle, and I shared quite a few of my favorite quotes. To me, this was a very great book and I loved it, and I rated it 5 stars. It was my first 5-star read of the year. Yeah. And now moving into the abysmal reading month of February, in which I was hit with the largest reading slump in recent history. So I'll just briefly mention 2 books that I read. One of them being There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce, which is by Morgan Parker. This is a collection of poetry. I have very mixed feelings about this collection of poetry, but I did enjoy it, and I do think that if you are someone who enjoys pop culture and critiques of how media displays women, commodifies bodies, things like that, specifically for Black women, definitely check this out. I tabbed a few pages in here, quite a few poems in here, and I also read Mona, which is a book that put me in a blender. It scrambled my brains, and I truthfully am still unsure of what I think of it, specifically the ending. But overall, this follows Mona, who is our main character. She is a Peruvian writer who just wrote her debut novel, and she is invited to a workshop for a prestige literary award, and at the end of the week, at the end of the workshop, the winner of the award will be announced. I'm still gathering my thoughts on this, especially the ending, but I will say I found it very interesting how the author critiqued academia and the literary world, and I thought that that was very, very interesting. Ever since finishing Mona, I have not been able to finish a single book after, and it's because, as I was saying before, Mona had my brain in an absolute blender. I was unable to think about reading anything else. Although I did start reading Lot by Brian Washington, which is a collection of short stories that reads more like a novel, honestly, because Brian Washington does such a great job of interweaving elements and characters from different stories into other stories, and some of the stories mainly focus on one narrator and his family. So that was interesting. But there is LGBTQ representation in here, and I really enjoyed it because it's a story of Black and brown people living in Houston, living in different neighborhoods of Houston, and Brian Washington's writing is very, very lively. I feel immersed in the culture and the energy of the setting that these characters are in, and the stories are very exciting. Some are very heartbreaking. In one story, there is a woman who is having an affair, and it's just like that classic neighborhood gossip story. And I wanted to read a short story collection because, as I was saying, I was pretty like all over the place in February, and I tend to turn to short story collections when I'm all over the place, or essay collections, because you can just read bits and pieces and not feel completely lost when you pick it up again. So yes, I started reading this. I also started reading Assembly by Natasha Brown, which I did not get very far in at all, to be honest. I think I'm on page 30. It's a very short book. Not to call anything too early, too soon, but I think this is going to be a favorite of 2022 for me as well. It really plays around with form, and it almost reads to me the way that like An Open Water or A Citizen, an American Lyric by Claudia Rankine does, and those are some of my favorite books. So I'm loving this so far. I just really haven't had the time to read it recently. But I will say one thing that is truly helping me out of this reading slump is this collection of poetry, The Carrying by Ada Limon. I spoke about Ada Limon before on my channel, but Ada Limon's poetry is so good. I read Bright Dead Things from her before, but The Carrying is just truly speaking to me. I am reading it at the brink or right at the cusp of winter turning to spring. The poems are about fertility as well as the fertile earth in spring. There's nature poetry. It reminds me very much of Mary Oliver's work, and I love Mary Oliver. I'm loving The Carrying. Very uplifting poems about perseverance, surviving despite it all, and wanting to survive despite it all. I just need something that's a little pick-me-up, that is like a boost of inspiration, a reminder to persevere, that like what you've been working towards or what you want is almost there, and you just have to dig deeper and go a little further until you get there. So that's what The Carrying is. So that was my little update. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I really appreciate all of you. If you have any video ideas or suggestions, please let me know what you would like to see next, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!
I was like, yo.